Star Wars Legends The Rebellion Omnibus Volume 1 is now available, as of March 2023. Anyway, as you may know, Marvel has gone all in on releasing Star Wars EU comics in these massive hardcover collections, all centered around a specific era in the Star Wars timeline. This book focuses on the aftermath of the Battle of Yavin. That means the Empire just took a serious hit with the destruction of the Death Star. The Rebellion has just proved that they are a credible threat, and our heroes, Luke, Han, and Leia, are all starting to get to know each other better. I feel like the Rebellion era is what most people think of when they hear Star Wars. So if that sounds interesting to you, this book may be exactly what you're looking for. Maybe. You see, what I would consider the main attraction of this book is the complete run of Brian Wood's Star Wars comic run, which is a little controversial in the fandom. But first things first, we're looking at the cover. It's the same cover of issue 2 of said comic run, and it looks amazing. That's because it is drawn by the legendary Alex Ross. It's got everything Star Wars. TIE Fighters, Millennium Falcon, Darth Vader, Boba Fett, X-Wings, and most interesting of all, Luke, Wedge, and Leia in black flight suits. We'll see what that's about a little later. The spine of the book has a picture of good old Darth Vader, and like with the other omnibuses, on the back is a collection of all the covers of all the stories that we will see within. And if you remove the dust jacket, it's a large image of the second Death Star being constructed over Endor, which was happening at the time. It looks cool, but I don't know why you would show this off on a book called The Rebellion. It should be an image of all the rebel leaders like Mon Mothma, Akbar, Leia, or something like that. But moving on to the book itself. If we open to the table of contents, we can see how the book is broken down. Since there are a lot of stories, I won't try to go over too much detail for each one, and just talk about the general story arc. And we have a few issues of Star Wars Empire, Vader's Quest, and then the 20 issues of Brian Wood's run, even more issues of Star Wars Empire, then the 20 issues of the comic in the Star Wars Kids magazine, then closed out with Star Wars 3D. Empire Issue 14, The Savage Heart, tells the story of what happened to Vader after the Battle of Yavin. It turns out that he crash-landed on a planet that looks like the African savannah and became the leader of a pack of hyenas. Very manly. In Empire number 7, Sacrifice, the local Imperial governor hires Boba Fett to pursue his brother and his band of rebels with Terminator-like efficiency. It's the classic Boba Fett being a badass, going after his bounty adventure. But if he's successful, he'd better have his payment ready. The next story arc is Empire's issue 16 through 18, called To the Last Man. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the Empire, having wealth and family connections counts a lot more than hard work. On the planet Meridoon, Lieutenant Janik Sunber continues to make the correct call over and over again when their squad gets attacked by the local natives. But his spoiled superiors are the ones who get to call the shots, even though they just get their company in more and more trouble. In Vader's Quest, Vader has finally discovered the identity of the Death Star pilot, and he wants to capture him. Meanwhile, Jal Tidganev, however you pronounce that, the rebel pilot whose X-Wing Luke had used to destroy the Death Star, feels a very bitter jealousy due to the farm boy's heroics, so he has to go through his own character arc, while Luke avoids the clutches of Lord Vader. And next is the Brian Wood run from 2013, with the first story arc called In the Shadow of Yavin. Now this series is a bit controversial, because it was advertised as only taking episode 4 into account, and pretending that nothing else had happened. Plus, there are even some contradictions, especially regarding the formation of Rogue Squadron, leading fans to believe that it's a soft reboot and shouldn't even be considered as part of the EU. Well, after talking to Randy Stradley at LegendsCon, it turns out this series is meant to fit in with the EU timeline, and it was only promoted as you only needing to know about episode 4 to understand what's going on. Be that as it may, some fans view the series as a step down in quality, and the fact that it was one of the very last comic arcs in the EU didn't help much either. But let's just get into it. This series has Leia herself fly as an X-Wing pilot, which is pretty cool. And the way it's written, with interpersonal drama within the Rebellion, sort of reminds me of a TV season more than anything else. Mon Mothma is worried about a mole inside the rebellion and has tasked Leia to find out who it might be. Meanwhile, to punish Vader for his failure at Yavin, Palpatine has given command of his ship over to Colonel Bircher as a way of testing Vader. Leia forms a new stealth squadron as a way of trying to search for a new rebel base location. And Han Solo is sent to Coruscant to purchase weapon systems for the rebellion. The next story arc, though it's not named in the Omnibus, is called From the Ruins of Alderaan. Han is continually being pursued by bounty hunters on Coruscant. Luke and Wedge have to escape from an Imperial prison, and Leia meets with a fellow Alderaanian, still coping with the loss of his planet. Next is a 2-issue story arc called 5 Days of Sith, which tells the story of Ensign Nanda working as a special assistant to Vader, and she learns just how terrifying he is. Probably my favorite story arc of the Brian Wood run. Next is the Rebel Girl story arc, but is untitled for whatever reason within the Omnibus. Leia is set to marry a prince, so that their planet and its resources will join the Rebel Alliance. Which may sound very familiar, because it also happens in the Courtship of Princess Leia novel. I really don't like how unoriginal the premise is, but the writing is decent. The final 2-issue story arc is the rushed ending of the comic run, thanks to Disney's decanonization. Han, Luke, and Leia set out to rescue a rebel agent being targeted by IG-88, and now we go back to the Empire comics with the A Little Piece of Home story arc. Leia asks an old friend, Ral Pantier, if they can use his moon as a new rebel base. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go well. In Empire issue 19, Target Vader, some assassins try to take on Vader. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go very well. In Empire issue 22, Alone Together, new recruit Dina Shan is head over heels for Captain Solo, and after going on an adventure with him and Leia, Dina realizes that Leia is pretty amazing too. In Empire issue 23, The Bravery of Being Out of Range, Scoundrel Boshek is helping Rasha Bex escape from some rebels that were pursuing her. Boshek is not interested in fighting on either side of the war, but as for Rasha Bex, there might be more to her than meets the eye. In the story arc Idiot's Array, Han and Chewie go on a supply run for the rebellion, but Han Solo wants to take a break to play sabacc and winds up getting captured by some unsavory characters. I hate it when that happens to me. In the story arc General Skywalker, the rebels try to establish a listening post on an unknown planet, but instead they come across a grizzled clone trooper named Abel that has been living on the jungle for 20 years. I really like Abel as a character. I think he's probably one of my favorite clone troopers, and his introduction does a good job at connecting the prequel era and the original trilogy together. And next are the comics originally published in the Star Wars Kids magazine. The first arc is called Rebel Thief. After Han realizes that there is hidden treasure on Yavin 4, he goes after it. Oh no, did he just betray the Rebel Alliance? In the second arc, X Marks the Spot, Han, Luke, and Leia go to purchase more X-Wing fighters and meet the guy who originally created them. Turns out he's a pretty cool guy. In the third arc, Imperial Spy, there's a spy on Yavin 4, secretly reporting to Darth Vader. Not to mention the Empire is finally attacking the Rebel base, and they have to evacuate. In the fourth and final arc, Death Star Pirates, during the evacuation, our heroes get attacked by pirates that have been hiding within the wreckage of the Death Star. Will they be able to escape? And the last comic in the Omnibus is Star Wars 3D, although sadly the black and white reprinted version of this story doesn't work with 3D glasses. In the first issue, Luke and Han return to Tatooine so that Luke can pay final respects to his childhood home and pass it along to the next person. In issue 2, the rebels have evacuated from Yavin while Luke and Han were away. Now they have to look for a new base, and then Han immediately recommends Hoth. That alone contradicts about a few dozen other stories within the EU. And it might just be me, but since this and Star Wars Kids deal with the evacuation of Yavin, I feel like they should be near the beginning of this book. But whatever. And the last issue, which is also the last story in the Omnibus, has Luke and Leia go on a supply run to Dantooine. Luke stumbles upon a race of creatures that look like flying Jawas called Fair Folk. They help train him in the Force, but it turns out they're actually working with Darth Vader himself. It is really weird. And then there's a few variant covers in the back, and that's about it. It's a pretty good collection of stories. Of all the Marvel omnibuses so far, they seem to be either 1,000 pages or 1,300 pages. Unfortunately, this one leans more towards 1,000 pages. They do plan on releasing the Rebellion Volume 2 next year, but they still could have added more to this one. Among more variant covers, art pages, and interviews that they could have placed at the end, Star Wars comics from around this era that haven't already been collected in hardcover collections include A New Hope Special Edition, which they could have placed at the beginning, Tales from Mos Eisley, Rebel Heist, A Valentine Story, Boba Fett and the Ship of Fear, The Hidden, Princess Leia and the Royal Ransom, Payback, Captain 3PO, The Rookies webcomic, Chewbacca and the Slavers of the Shadowlands, Outbid but Never Outgunned, and Shadowstalker. None of these appear in this omnibus, or will appear in Rebellion Volume 2, sadly. Volume 2 will also have about 1,000 pages, when it honestly could have had more. Like I said, it's still a pretty good collection, and as I've said with previous omnibuses, do not buy it for the full $125 market value, especially when sites like Amazon have it discounted greatly. If you are interested in checking it out for yourself, there will be a link in the description.